Hello everybody and welcome to our live BVNA webinar this Wednesday evening. We've got the attendees flooding in. It takes a few seconds for everyone to join, so welcome everybody. My name is Wendy Nevins. I am currently Senior Vice President of BVNA. Very warm welcome. I'm also attempting to stream this live on the BVNA Facebook page. So it's just trying to connect at the moment. So very shortly we will also be live, fingers crossed, on the Facebook page very shortly. So I'm chairing this webinar this evening. I'm not giving the presentation. I can hear the huge sigh of relief there. I'll be handing over to our speakers very shortly. Just before we start, if you haven't been on a webinar before, just a few top tips so that you get a great experience this evening. If you're connected through Wi-Fi, you can sometimes get audio disturbances. So if the speaker ends up sounding like a Dalek, it could be due to your Wi-Fi connection. If you're not able to go onto a wired connection, you can connect to the audio via the telephone. So depending on what your device you're on, the menu bar maybe, or your toolbar maybe at the bottom or the top of your screen, there is a little mic symbol with a mute, and there's a little up arrow. If you select that, you can then dial in on the telephone. You should still be able to see the presentation on your device, be it tablet, Mac, smartphone, Android, other brands are available. But you will be able to hear the audio down your telephone. So I'm just trying to connect. If anybody's on the Facebook Live, then do comment. That would be great. I'm trying to connect that at the moment. Before I hand over to the interesting people, I have a poll question for everybody attending. And I'm just going to launch that now. It's not mandatory, but it'd be great if you could answer that for us. Are you a current BVNA member? So that should just pop up for you. And if you just select yes or no for us, wow, brilliant. Loads of people are hitting that poll. So thank you very much. The Facebook Live is glitching at the moment, so I'll just have to start that again for us. So if you could just let us know if you're a current BVNA member, yes or no, that would be great. And we've nearly got everyone voting, so that's brilliant. So we have at the moment 53% of us are members that are on the Zoom call this evening, so that's great. Welcome members and non-members. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. So I'll just close that poll and I shall mute myself shortly, so don't worry. But I am so excited. We have got some brilliant speakers tonight. One of them is an ex-colleague and close friend, Sam Morgan, who I'm sure name is very familiar to all of you, past president of BVNA. And we also have Charlotte, who is our current education manager at the BVNA. So I will hand over to Charlotte to start the presentation whilst I'll battle with the tech to get the Facebook live streaming. So over to you, Charlotte. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you everyone for joining us this evening. I appreciate that it's a really emotive time at the moment. Lots of you are undergoing lots of stress and anxiety, perhaps a bit of frustration and worry. So hopefully this webinar will provide you with some answers to some of your questions and also signposting to further resources where they're available at the moment. So just to go through what we plan to cover this evening. So this webinar will last about 40 minutes. And this includes the question and answer session at the end of the meeting. So first of all, I will provide an update over the current coronavirus situation and how that is impacting veterinary practices at the moment. I'll then hand over to Sam. So Sam will go through an overview of the current situation and how this is impacting students specifically. And we'll also go through some ideas for remote learning whilst you're working from home. We'll then invite questions for Sam and I to answer, and then we'll close the meeting. So as I say, that will be in about 40 minutes time. So just to provide an update as to how the UK is currently being affected by coronavirus. So at the moment there are 161,145 positive cases in the UK, and that's as at the 27th of April, which was the most up-to-date figures that were available to us. And then there have been 21,678 deaths that have occurred in hospitals, again as a result of coronavirus. So really just to reiterate the current government advice, this is currently that if you have symptoms of coronavirus, which are a high temperature and a new continuous cough, you have to stay at home for 7 days. You should only call NHS 111 if your condition worsens or if it doesn't improve after 7 days. And if members of your household have symptoms, you must stay at home for 14 days from the day the first person got symptoms. The other advice is that you have to stay at home. So from Monday, the 23rd of March, we entered a lockdown in the UK, and you can only leave home for the following reasons. So to shop for basic necessities, and this is as infrequently as possible, one form of exercise per day, any medical need or to provide care or help for a vulnerable person, and travelling to and from work, but only where absolutely necessary and if you cannot work from home. So to clarify, the BVNA and RCBS currently interpret this information to include people seeking essential, urgent and emergency veterinary care for their animals. So what impact is all of this having on veterinary practices at the moment? So the RCBS have issued guidelines which ensures essential or emergency treatments can still be available, along with necessary veterinary care to protect animal welfare. However, it's really important to clarify here that this also means that we are ensuring the well-being and safety of the veterinary team. That's really important. So as vets will be risk assessing each case when considering if face-to-face treatment is necessary, it's really important to liaise with your practice team and protocols, because veterinary decisions will be varying at the moment between practice to practice. The number of staff working in your practice will likely have been reduced to a skeleton team. There will therefore be a significant change to normal working practices, and a proportion of the team may have already been furloughed. So remember, if you have been furloughed, this isn't a criticism, and it doesn't mean you're not a valued member of the team. It's a vital step to ensure that only the very essential staff are working at the moment. For students also, we acknowledge that many of you may have already been furloughed, or you may be in the current position where you're unable to complete your clinical placements. Face-to-face interactions with clients, these will also be minimised as far as possible. So if a physical exam of a pet is required, clients should be asked if they or a member of their household are currently self-isolating or showing symptoms, and only one person should accompany the animal to the practice. Then we have social distancing measures in place again to protect veterinary staff. So these may then include asking the client to wait in reception, outside, or perhaps even in their car while the team examines their pet. And again, while this may seem a bit strange to clients at the moment, it's really important to reiterate that this is for the safety of the veterinary team. Remote services may also be provided, again, to limit that face-to-face contact. So these may include steps such as telephone triage, video consultations, and remote prescribing of medications. So as a result of all of this, we're still very far from describing the current situation as business as usual. It's really important that clients are aware of this too. This just means that we can manage their expectations so that they can expect that there is a delay if there is any non-essential care that is required for their animal. They need to be aware that there will be a wait at this time. Okay, so I will now hand over to Sam. So Sam will just talk through how the situation is specifically affecting students at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Charlotte, for giving us that overview. I'm going to just give a quick overview as sort of regards to where we are within education. Now, my background is further education and apprenticeships, but I have got advice as well for higher education from there. So I've put some figures up there just to give an overview. So I can only base it based on my current students, but sort of speaking to others, I can imagine it's fairly similar. So we have roughly just over half our students are still in work and are able to do that, whether they be on reduced hours or they are doing just consistent overtime, or they're managing to stick with normal hours but altered shift patterns. That's currently where we are. We have got around 45% of learners on the government job retention scheme. So they're currently at home, still being paid for 80% of their salary, but are not within the practice situation from there. So where it comes to then certainly the further education or apprenticeship routes, if learners are furloughed, I think it's still really important to state that learning and training can still continue. You're only not allowed to do any work, if you like, if it's making the company money, and that's working within practice, but certainly your training or your learning can continue. And the training providers are out there, and we are doing, sort of set it up as best we could do to try and get that learning remotely and help you with that. But what we're probably asking you for, and certainly we're asking it from our students, is we need evidence that learning is still happening. You can't just disappear on us. We need that in house. So if your training provider is still asking you for, oh, have you submitted this piece of work, then that's why. It's to show the funding agencies and apprenticeships that that's still happening. So within our sector then, certainly no current written exams are being taken place because there's no current protocols in order to keep students and examiners safe with the assessments as they are. And similarly, we are unable at the moment to run OSCE exams for similar reasons. And certainly what's happened then is, sort of our awarding organisations, so CQ, VetSkill and Sitting Guilds, can approach the RCBS with alternative solutions for approval. And what we must do, though, is ensure the quality assurance of entry into the profession must be upheld, even with these circumstances. And that anyone who enters onto the register is still safe to practice for long-term purposes. So any alternative assessment must meet professional requirements, along with the necessity to keep all involved safe at that time. If we look at the overview of the higher education situation, there is much more of a worry or an emphasis on problems with placements or work situations, unlike maybe what we have. There's no furlough scheme if you're voluntary or doing your placement within a practice. So that's a concern on what's happening with higher education. So many students are unable to complete placement blocks as planned. Similarly then, at the moment, a lot of higher education establishments are not able to run the practicals or the OSCEs, whatever the form they run, due to the RCBS announcement and the plans put in place. But again, the RCBS has set up the task force, meaning they're listening to students, educators' concerns, and they're accepting ideas for alternative assessments for the task force. And they will feed back to the Council by June for any arrangements that can be put in place. In some institutions then, exams and teaching have moved online. There are associated IT internet issues, also concerns for students that already have responsibilities within the house, or where they are trying to work in regards to time and maybe time to do those exams. And certainly there's an uncertainty surrounding job prospects after the COVID-19 pandemic and maybe social restrictions have lifted. How long is this going to take to get back into place? So what we have then overall, I think, for whether you're higher education or further education, is a generalized feeling of anxiety during this time, and increases cortisol levels, which increases your stress response. And certainly if you had any pre-existing mental health issues, this could be exacerbated during this current time. So we're all have been impacted by this. We are all resentful of missed opportunities, big or small, work-related or study-related, and certainly exams are, something I personally are deeply sad about. My students can't sit at this time. I had students that were ready to finish now in April, and it's a sad time that they can't do. We may also have concerns about the disease itself, about us maybe getting sick or people we care about getting sick. We're trying to come to terms with this new state of normal. Even, going shopping now is very different. The media is mostly negative news, which enhances feelings of anxiety. And there's so much speculation about what next, and very little answers about what next and where we go, what next, and what are the plans that they're not out there. And will this change, and how long this change will have for our impact in the future? So all this is the big green bullet point. It's uncertainty. That's what we're living through at the moment. We're in this very uncertain time. This provokes fear. And the way we respond to uncertainty can be good. It can force us to seek out new opportunities and seek out new ideas, but it can also be not so good. So we can wrongly adapt to that by worrying, fretting, drinking, eating too much. And there was a really good webinar that I watched on the weekend then by VetKind or Mind Matters, and I know we're going to put a link after this session, called Calm in the Corona. And that helps you build an intolerance of uncertainty. And it's certainly, that's worth a look at if you're interested in that. So what we have then during this time then is we have a lot of students working, studying, same thing, from home or working at home. And, certainly the risks then that we have are associated with that. So actually, where most people may think, oh, you're working at home, you're just sort of, lying around. Actually, the main issue with working at home is, we know, getting away from work. We actually overwork during that point, because, oh, we'll just do a little bit more. We just do a little bit more. There's no getting away from it. There's no distinct cutoff from where you might have used the library, or you might have used other facilities, and then you go home and you have your home time. There isn't. And there's this sort of little bit of guilt maybe associated as well with, or do we spend time with the family, or do we need to spend time studying? And we're sort of trying to balance that whilst being at home. And that can cause, a lot of conflict. It is hard whether you live alone or whether you live with others. There's pressure either side. And generally this can lead to disengagement, lethargy, and generalized feeling of what's the point. We're very uncertain. When's my exams going to be? When's my OSCEs going to be? What's the point of doing anything? And so that breeds then this, sort of vicious circle that we might find ourselves in. And then we have that generally some people are just not good at working from home. You like to be strict on yourself. You'd like to work in a certain place. And now it's all mixed in and mixed in together. And then some people are actually really going to like working remotely, and issues may come back when we need to try and go back into practice or try and get back into learning. And so we may see issues coming a bit further later. So some of the ways then, so what we need to do is trying to think about, right, okay, so this is thinking about from a clinical coach and a student point of view, what factors can affect, and maybe some little things of what we can start doing. So what we need to consider then for people who are at home working is certainly the current workload that they already have, and that's their day-to-day. So there's this, sort of additional thing that we're putting on to try and balance this situation. Also, do the students have the correct equipment that they need to access their learning? Even something as simple, did they have a textbook at home? Have they got internet access? Have they got computer equipment? And certainly if, there's any students out there that are struggling with that, please get in touch with your training provider or your, organization that you're learning with, and speak with them, because there are options of what we can do, but we need you to tell us that. We may have a case that maybe not everyone is lucky to have a dedicated area. Maybe people are utilizing kitchen space or bedroom space, and generally it's not a good setup to try and work from home. We're sort of almost over a month in now, and if you're trying to work in those cramped conditions, that's a long time. It's fine for a couple of days, but it does impact on that. Finances also impact maybe on ability to have that equipment, etc. You know, if you are not working at all at the moment, you have no income, even if you've been furloughed, yes, you're getting 80%, but maybe that's not quite enough. Again, speak with, you know, your clinical coach, your training provider, see what's out there that we can help you with. And we'll certainly signpost you to the BVNA helpline and the Benevolent Fund as well, to see if there's anything we can do to help. We might need to care for others while at the home. So a lot of our students may have children, they may have, you know, people that they need to care for whilst at home. And again, that if I bring back in the point of trying to make sure that if we are getting to a point where we can do exams online, we need to be really careful with those students that do have those additional commitments. And, you know, can we guarantee the circumstances of being able to give that student the fair chance of being able to do that exam online? With shared living spaces, it's important that everyone has their personal time away, maybe even if it's just half an hour every other day or every day, you have that time where we need that time away. We're not, you know, even the most social person is not used to being with someone constantly, which sometimes with this forced situation that we have. And some students may lose the chance to build on workplace confidence. So students need to be mentored through this time, and that they're losing out on this time. And there's also, I don't know if anyone else feels the same as I do, sometimes there's a little bit of a pressure on us at the moment that, oh, you're at home, you've got loads of time. How about learn a new skill, learn to sign language, learn to, you know, I don't know, speak French, watch all these box sets. And I simply haven't got time, but I'm feeling this pressure that I need to come out of this situation with this brand new skill. And I just haven't got that with there. Okay, and then we have our feeling of isolation or feeling alone. So what can we do to support our team? And that, you know, again, going for clinical coaches, but also from a peer-to-peer point of view, maybe you have, you know, fellow students that you look into support. So hopefully, especially for those that are furloughed, the practice is making contact with you. You're having check-ins, whether that comes from a senior management team, and they're telling you the situation of what's going on in work, even if it's just a once a week basis or once a, you know, couple of weeks, to give you an update, especially if you're furloughed and you're disconnected from your team at the moment. Maybe hopefully clinical coaches can reach out to their students, maybe, you know, just once per week, just to have that check-in time. How are you doing? What's going on? You know, how are you coping today? And again, just for your colleagues as well, just, you know, student to student. And, you know, certainly student well-being is our main concern at the moment. We're trying to keep students in a positive frame of mind while they go on. We can do this formally. You can have video calling, you can have formal meetings via video or phone, but be aware some people are insecure, uncomfortable when using video calls. So that might be a little bit of a check-in that you might need to do. So certainly as well, it's a good idea to develop a social contact with in the team. So communicate, you know, just informally. So text, WhatsApp groups. I'm sure there's many other ways of doing that. Even, you know, just receiving a letter through the post or using something like TouchNote to send picture postcards, just as a little informal way of keeping in touch, especially with those students or, you know, other colleagues that are very isolated during this time. And certainly making sure we signpost any, you know, well-being support that is needed. When you're speaking with students, it's, you know, sort of a good idea to get students to reflect or identify any specific examples that they want help with or they need, you know, some guidance with from there, and that will help you with that. Okay. So those of you who are at home working, you need to try and structure your day. I know that that's a very hard thing and you're certainly not used to it. Try and get yourself a daily routine, especially, you know, sort of Monday to Friday, and set your boundaries that you need. So I know it's a very simple point, but one that was good to me was actually get washed and get dressed. It really does make a difference. You don't do so well maybe in your pajamas all day. You may not feel ready and prepared for work. Make sure you are getting still a good amount of sleep. and try and adapt your environment as much as you can do, especially if you are doing sort of the kitchen share or the bedroom share with your work. But try and get your environment set up to suit where you are, so you're feeling like when you're sat there and you have that time that you are working within there. And don't try and go at it all day. Don't think, right, okay, right, I'm all up, I'm dressed, it's 9 o'clock, I'm going to go right the way through to 5 o'clock. Make sure you're having your regular breaks. Make sure you're having your regular meals, you're going outside to get your exercise, you have time to relax, do whatever you do to relax, whether that's doing some, sort of form of exercise, or you're being creative, or you're having that chance to reflect back on, and sort of break up your study time. Don't think, right, okay, that's 8 hours, that's all I'm going to do, because it just isn't realistic, and it won't happen. Make sure you do connect with people, your friends, your family, people from your course. There's definitely a need for social interaction with the vet nursing course. If you're struggling with something, I bet you some other peer is struggling with something as well, and you just don't get it, and maybe you can both arrange a tutorial with your tutor or your clinical coach, but it gives you that little bit of sense of ease that someone else is struggling, someone else is feeling the same way I am. There isn't a good wellness tracker. It's almost like, if you're like me, you love a little tick sheet. There's a wellness tracker from the Association of Veterinary Students, or AVS. Again, we'll put the link at the end for that, but it's literally a tick list of, have I gone outside today? Have I done some exercise? Have I eaten? Which sounds really silly, but these days, especially for me, they're all rolling into one, and it's good, to have that check-in with yourself and making sure that, there is that need. Okay, some other ideas then that we have then for learning whilst at home, and what we can do. So certainly there was a good thing. There was a news article written by Louise Crowe, which is still on the BVNA news feed there, with loads of suggestions of matching up the NPL with trying to do working at home. And certainly if you're using the skills log or vet skills version, or your university's version, you can marry those skills up and doing the same thing. So yeah, there are resources out there. I'm not saying anything that anyone doesn't know on this list here that you can have and you can develop, and it's just finding the motivation and the time to get these done, but you pick whatever's going to help you in there. Also, VDS have got a load of training webinars called Student Surgeries. I think that's every Wednesday as well. And one of them, which sort of the title caught my eye, is How to Ace Your Exam from Your Bedroom, which is really interesting. And again, even though it's shared, for veterinary students, you certainly can pick lots of bits out of there. Also, reach out to your provider, whether you're university or your college. We are doing our best. We all out there, and certainly speaking to providers earlier on today, there's so many great ideas of what we got out there, but if it's not working for you, please let them know, please let us know, and we want to support our learners. We want to help you during this time. So reach out, make a connection, even if it's just to say, oh, I'm not feeling too good at the moment, what can I do? We can help and do that. If we don't know, we can't help you with that, so please use that time to have that reach out. And then 2 notes. I know a lot of this has been sort of, if you're at home and you're working, some of you, as we've seen on mine, most of my students are still working. In fact, some of them are doing overtime, more than what they should do, and that's again poses its own difficulties, that even though they're still getting the work experience, the practical skills, actually then their studying is being impacted, the time at home then is being hard, and they also have concerns sometimes about staying safe within work. So again, try and set yourself a routine. If you have a long work shift, be realistic about you're not going to have time to go home and study. Try and plan. You may need to change around your study period where you used to. Have a change in priorities. Maybe the skills log or your online log is not the priority right now. Maybe catching up with the remote learning coming out from your training provider is going to be more of a priority right now. And certainly if you are having trouble balancing time, speak with your training provider, your university, and or your clinical coach. so that they're aware and they know the situation and what they can do to help and support you through that and this very odd time we find ourselves in at the moment. Okay, so I think that brings us through, hopefully, to our question and answer session.
Thank you so much, Sam. We've had some really lovely comments and feedback during that.
Okay.
Charlotte, is there anything you'd like to add before we go on to the question and answer session?
I think the main thing really that I would just kind of reiterate is, you know, we completely appreciate that it is a really frustrating time for students at the moment. I can assure you from speaking with a lot of educators as well that equally they want you to progress as well. There's nobody that's holding you back for no reason. But I think it's just really important to reiterate that a lot of the, well, all of the guidance that is in place at the moment is to keep everyone safe. It is a massive problem at the moment. Obviously, we're aware of the impact that coronavirus is having on students' ability to progress. But equally, it's not for no reason. It is to keep everyone, whether that's students, veterinary staff, the assessors themselves, it's to keep everybody safe. Okay.
Super, thank you very much. Sorry, I think my audio dropped out for a moment then, but don't panic, Sam. Charlotte, I'm still here. I could hear the panic then. Sorry about that. So we've got quite a few questions that have been sent in, and hopefully we've covered those in the prepared slides that Sam and Charlotte have prepared for us. And there are quite a few questions and comments in the question box. So if it's okay with you both, Sam and Charlotte, I'll keep you hooked up to the webinar so that we can get through some of these comments and questions that have come through.
Absolutely, yes.
So bear with me a moment. As you can imagine, as people are typing, questions are zipping off the top of my screen. So I just want to make sure comments. This is a brilliant webinar. These tips are helpful for everyone. So that's a lovely comment. I'm finding this really helpful. A comment here from somebody, some corporate practices have a hardship fund. This should be open to employed students as well. So just to add on to the financial advice and Daphne Shipman Benevolent Fund links there, some corporates have a hardship fund as well.
Excellent, yeah.
Some of the questions, I'm trying to sort of lump some of the questions together in themes. So for the attendees, if I don't ask your question in the exact words, then please bear with me. I'm trying to sort of get them together rather than asking too many similar questions back to back. So quite a few questions here about exams and if OSCEs are not happening or are happening or delayed, and what can students do to keep themselves active and prepared? Is it worth keep on doing practical revisions and keeping, or sometimes is it best to have a break? Sam, what do you think on that?
Yeah, I certainly think, you know, keep fresh, even if it's just doing, you know, the odd calculation, your fluid therapy calculations, your pharmacy calculations, you know, keep all that muscle memory still going. I know there's, you know, lots of inventive ways you can, you know, use teddies or socks and things at home to stimulate radiography positioning. You can make use of, you know, some of the videos out there, especially Jane RVN has done lots of videos on OSCEs, just to keep that, you know, you ticking over, keep you almost fit, if you like, an OSCE ready. Yeah. So definitely don't just say, oh, that's it, I'm going to give up, because you almost maybe have to start that muscle memory again.
Yeah, yeah, and you said about the support groups and sort of student WhatsApp groups. You know, if you sort of, you know, get together with some students in your class and have an OSCE practice by WhatsApp or Zoom. Or,
yeah, you can be as creative as you like, absolutely.
Yeah, it would be great to have some ideas from attendees as to, you know, the most inventive ways we can have sort of students practicing their OSCEs virtually would be awesome. And we've got quite a few questions asking about exams. So I'm just going to try and sum up, as in, are the exams definitely cancelled? My college has said I'm still going to sit mine in June. Are written exams still going to take place. I've been told that I can do it in July. Now, is that something we can answer?
We certainly haven't had, I can only speak personally. So as a company, we use central qualifications. We haven't had any definitive dates. We certainly haven't had the word cancel. We keep using postpone. Maybe I use cancel wrongly in there. Certainly postponed. It was not going to be the GCSE A-level situation. I can't see going on with that, where there's just no exams. But certainly we haven't had any definitive dates yet, and I don't think they can until government themselves come out with some guidelines, and then the Department for Education then sets their guidelines. Our kind of awarding organisations are underneath that then, and they can set their own guidelines, but it's almost that chain of command needs to happen from the top.
Exactly, and I think that's really being reflected. So the comments are flipping, people are typing away here, and with varying answers. So some people are saying, my exams have gone online, so that's absolutely fine. Some people are saying, I'm a lecturer and we haven't had any definitive dates. And again, it's someone else is asking, can I take my exams online? So I think that echoes what, sorry, questions are zooming in. More people are typing. Can you slow down when you're typing? It's great to see all this engagement, so please do type in as many questions as you guys want to throw at us, please do. But it's a similar theme that in the answers you gave to people's questions, but there's so many different answers. Some exams are happening, some exams may not be. And there isn't one answer, is there, Sam?
There isn't, and it does depend as well whether you're higher education, whether you're further education, who is setting the exams and who has that overall say so. That may be the disparity between whether some exams are going ahead and some aren't. Just keep your training providers, I am sure, are battling with and speaking with your awarding organisations that you're dealing with to get, we want exams to happen as well. We want students to, complete. This is not, a nice situation for anyone. So yes, we're certainly in lots of contact with our awarding organisation. And again, they're in talks with RCBS up that chain of command to try and get approval in place for alternative measures.
Super, thank you. Do you have anything else to add to that, Charlotte?
So it's probably worth, Sam mentioned earlier on in her presentation that the RCBS are currently working with a task force, and that task force is looking at alternative methods of assessment. So if the coronavirus situation does carry on for longer than we hope, they are looking at alternative methods of assessment so that hopefully students won't be delayed too much by this process, or too much more than they already have been. In terms of timelines, obviously it's really difficult for us to be able to speculate on that at the moment because we just don't know. It's expected that task force will feed back to the RCBS BN Council in June, and then we will look at if there's potential options for alternative assessment from there. But it's, at the moment, as I say, it's just so difficult to be able to predict what the next few months are going to look like, unfortunately.
Thank you, Charlotte. Since you mentioned the task force, a flurry of questions have come in and asking, how do we get in touch with this task force? And it's an RCBS task force, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and they are actually accepting ideas for alternative assessment. So you can feed them back to the RCBS via vet nursing, all one word, at rcbs.org.uk, and we can pop that in the link after the webinar. So they are listening to students. They are appreciating that it is a really frustrating time for those that are held up at the moment. So they will take on board ideas, and if there is anything that is feasible to be able to offer as an alternative, they will look at it.
Super, thank you very much. I'm just going through, I think a lot of the questions are about exams, written and practicals, which I think we've covered, as in, we're unable to answer specific questions as to if your exam is going to take place and when. Am I right in saying that, that really those questions need to be directed to your educational institutions, be it colleges, universities? Is that correct, Sam?
Yeah,
well?
that's absolutely correct, because it will change from provider to provider, you know, from especially
Yep.
rewarding organisations. Yeah.
Brilliant. And the last thing we want to do is give any information that may not be accurately applicable to you as an individual, because we know that's just going to cause you more stress and worry that you just don't need. So that's why, if you feel we're not answering your questions directly and individually, is because the information may be different for you individually. So you know, please don't think that we're not wanting to answer those questions. Okay, I'm looking at the time. Can we keep you both on for another few moments to answer a few more questions, please?
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
fine.
absolutely.
It's a bit mean of me to ask you, because you're not actually going to say no, are you? Because that would be you could say your internet dropped out. Okay, so just going more to the MPL and furlough. So you're saying that the students can carry on working and carrying on collecting evidence. What happens, and you may or may not be able to answer this, if the clinical coach is furloughed?
Yes, yeah, so the clinical coach can certainly still, if you know they're able to, under their own circumstances, depending on the reason why they're furloughed, but certainly they can still keep in touch with their student and support them as best they can do. Or maybe there's arrangements for another coach within the practice to become a temporary clinical coach or an additional clinical coach during that time, or act as a suitable witness if the student is still working but their main mentor is on furlough. So it, again, depending on that circumstance,
Yeah.
but certainly that communication can still be occurring, because that they're not earning money for the practice by still supporting their students. And I'm sure many coaches would still want to be that contact and be that support if they can do.
Super, thank you very much. Do you have anything, Charlotte, to add to that answer?
Yeah, so just to echo what Sam has said, really, it's all about who the most appropriate person is to support that student at that moment in time. So that's where it's very much an individual decision as to whether it is the clinical coach, even if they have been furloughed, or, as Sam says, if it's an alternative member of staff that's available.
Thank you. And a few more questions concerning furlough and students. If we can clarify, because a few more people are still asking this, if the student is furloughed, can they still log anything on their MPL?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Sorry,
yeah.
I thought we had answered that.
It's just a really
a few
quick
more
question.
questions coming in.
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
Wanted to because we said work on, but I didn't.
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify the actual logging of
Yeah.
evidence on that. So that's great. Let me just scroll back. Thank you so much. This has been super helpful and reassuring. What if we're both, if a CC and a student is furloughed, then we've covered that. We can work can still be done. Thank you, ladies. Some useful tips, information and links. Will this webinar be available to share afterwards? Yes, it will be. The Facebook Live failed epically. The software was down, so apologies if anyone was trying to join on Facebook Live, but it is being recorded and we will share this afterwards. If there are questions as well that we haven't got to or have been lost in the stream of questions that are coming in, we will be able to export them and answer them and hopefully get them answered. Is it going to be a blog post, Charlotte, do you think, with the answers to the questions?
Yes, yeah, so absolutely, where it's possible for us to provide answers to anything, absolutely we'll incorporate those into a blog.
Awesome, thank you.
Can I just forward on to the link slide, so Wendy?
Oh yeah,
so,
awesome.
There we are, so people have that on the front.
Brilliant. So that's there, so if anybody wants to sort of copy and paste those links, that's all in there, that's fine. Just reading back through, well done guys, really good webinar. Oh, I like that comment.
Oh.
We've had some questions around logging of hours, and you know, if students aren't going to be able to log the hours that they need if they're furloughed or if they're working less, that I'm guessing that's a question really that would need to go to the RCBS. Is that correct?
It is. So if you are furloughed, obviously you are going to not be claiming your practice hours that you need, whether it's a higher education placement or it's your further education job or apprenticeship that you have. That's the one thing you can't do, and those hours may need to be made up at the end. Or I thought the RCBS might look at that, but that would certainly be a question directly for the RCBS and VN Council to consider.
Brilliant. Really good, positive, helpful advice. Keep up the great work. Brilliant. I think we've covered the topics for most people's questions. If you've got any specific ones, you've got about 30 seconds to get on the keyboard and type them in, if we can get them in before we close the webinar. Before we do, if you'd like to go on to the next slide, I think we've got details of the next webinar. If the next webinar is applicable to you, Nikki Ackley from our BVNA Members Advisory Service is an HR expert, and she'll be talking to us about self-employed vet nurses, Q&A sessions. That's on the 6th of May. I'm just going to copy and paste the direct registration link for you into the chat box. So if you want to get ahead and get yourself registered for that webinar, then I have popped that link into the chat box there. I just want to check if there's any questions that we haven't covered that you'd like to email to us, bvna@bvna.co.uk, and we'll try and include those in any questions that we've missed from the live session and get those up onto the blog post. Could you write the email address here, please? Yep, bear with us, BVNA. I'm just going to write the email address into the chat box. There we go. Someone asked for that. So that's in there. So if you've got questions that we haven't gone through and you've typed them in, we will be looking through those. And I'd just like to thank Charlotte and Sam very much for their time this evening. Sam, as you know, was past president of BVNA and has been involved with BVNA in a very long time. So I was so pleased when she agreed to my request for her to do the webinar. Yeah, she didn't say no, and I knew she'd be awesome. So thank you very much, Sam, for giving us your time.
No problem.
I've had some lovely comments. Thanks everyone, really helpful webinar. Thank you so much for your time this evening. Thank you so much for taking students into consideration. And I've just had a reminder from our head of membership who was on the webinar, survey. So when we close the webinar, a survey will pop up and your feedback enables us to provide the webinars when you want, how long you want for, and what topics you want covered. At the moment, these webinars are open to the whole profession, but as a membership association, we are here for our members and the wider profession. So make sure you complete the survey when it pops up. Oh great, Katie's giving me a smiley face, so I think I did okay. Thank you so much, both of you, for your time, and thank you everybody for joining the webinar. Thank you for your questions. The BVNA is here for the whole profession, and we do want to be open to your feedback and answer your questions as much as we can. So we will see you on the next webinar on the 6th of May. Unless you email before us or comment on Facebook, we will speak to you all soon. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye for now. Bye, Charlotte. Bye, Sam.
Bye.
Thank you.